It's MG Rob back with you, and today we're going to be continuing on my MGA Fastback. So I have spent a little bit of time here tweaking the shape of the opening for the boot lid. Got it flattened out here a little bit more in here so we get a good shape. And I went ahead and took the rest of the skin off down to just about a ½ inch all the way around here. Because we need that off there anyway to build the skin anyway, and it was throwing the look off because it was bowing too much. So what I done, once I got all this shaped where I think it's good enough to go, I cut some 3/4 inch square tubing that's left over from Project Ginsu from jigging it up, and put that in here with some plates on the end and got this thing clecoed in place to where it won't move now, giving me a nice base to work to and from to figure out how I'm going to get this actually held in place to build, because I got to take these off. This was just to try to get everything, get my lines, keep my lines, and then build up to this, take this off to actually start building the car. But the next thing we're going to do is try to work on this fender line here. I don't quite know how I'm going to do it yet. I've been thinking about it quite a bit and haven't quite worked it out yet, but we're going to jump in and try to make something happen. So I've already taken the edge of the fender that I cut off, that was bolted on here, and I tacked it in place. Tacked it on top and on the bottom sides. And I went ahead and took all the bolts out and trimmed off the bottom edge of the flange to get it out of my way. And then I figured, well, I'll start off by just getting one of these flanges taped on here to try to see what I'm going to do and think about how I'm going to make all this come together. Now normally, my MO here is I would want to cut all of this out. And then I would take this and arch this up a lot better, rebuild all of this, make it look as factory as possible. But I gotta remind myself, this car is about having fun, not about going that deep and trying to make it that factory kind of look. It's just have some fun, get it done. It doesn't matter if those are that nice, so we're just gonna, push forward and not spend so much time on that stuff. So it's gonna be not my normal style, but these details don't really matter to the average viewer looking at the car when it's finished anyway. They're never going to see that. It's just, I know it. Well, I was worried about this line not being straight if I cut too much of this out. But as I sit and look at it with the strip in place, if I only cut portions of it out, then I won't be able to actually get in there and finish cutting it out. So I think what I'm going to end up doing is going ahead and just cutting it from here all the way back and all the way down, getting the whole strip out of the way. So I went ahead and tacked on a brace here, another brace in here, just to keep this from moving and to keep this from wanting to go anywhere. And we'll just start cutting and make something happen. So apparently I must have lost a little bit of footage, so I'm going back here to show that once I got this thing cut all out here, what I did was I just made this and actually sections that were, if you try to do all this in one piece, it's a real bear to try to tack it in place, because every time you tack it, the metal wants to move just slightly, and then by the time you get back here, it doesn't line up. So I did it in manageable pieces. So I got it tied in from here back, all the way back into there. And I just, you know, didn't get too worried about all this stuff, trying to match it all real nice, like I said before. But it should suffice. If I want to, just a little bit of undercoating over that, and, you know, nobody will really question it too much. We're going to get a closer look at what I actually did here. Now, I didn't grind off all the weld smooth. I left most of it there, just knocked the tops of it off to make sure that I left as much strength within that as I can. Here's the inside edge of it. So I'm going to start working on getting the inner structure put together here, now that I've cut all this away. And I've been working on a piece here. So I actually used a shrinker stretcher to do the same thing as I did with the window frame, just at an 18 gauge instead of 20 gauge like I did here. And we tack something up like, so it's got a little bit of twist and turn and everything in it, but it's, connect this to the inner fender well. But what I did was I'm putting a plate here, doing it pretty close to what the factory did, but just slightly different. I wanted to bridge this weld seam, get into the original metal as well as that metal, just to be sure that it's strong. And then spot weld it all together. And I got another cool tool over here that you guys haven't seen yet. That's a little, you know, a small amperage spot welder. I traded a small Bluetooth hole punch for this, and this was worth a heck of a lot more than that. So, and it's really nice for doing stuff like this. Except this one, like I said, is a small one, so it doesn't have a bunch of power. I can't go through, like I can't do rockers with it because it won't do, you know, 3 thicknesses of metal. It'll only do 2. But you just put it in there, and then we got ourselves a spot weld. This thing's supposed to have a cable coming up here to automatically pull that, but it's broken and I haven't tried to fix it yet, so I just do it manually. So we just keep doing that until all this stuff's done. And it has no timer, you just have to kind of guess, is that enough? And then what I'll do is I'll come in here and weld all this, and then grind all that nice. And then we'll clean up the inner fender well, and then I can actually take this thing off of here and take it over to the car and put it over by hand and do it in place. Well, I haven't been able to find much footage existing on my camera here of actually doing this stuff here, just a little bit on this here, but I got this welded in now. We got this all welded down here and ground off fairly smooth. And what I did was I took the end piece that originally came off of here and used that down here to get that extra length to get it where I need it here, and then just duplicated the original bracket here that was down on this from the factory, and then spot welded all this together and welded that up. So now that I got the flange welded on here and I've got these braces in place, I want to start putting some of the captive nuts in here. So what I did was I salvaged some of these captive nuts here off of the old flange. And what you do is I ground on the back of the metal here until you can peel away what was the part of the flange that was there, and then clean this up, and then I go ahead and punch a few holes in here. You can drill out the original spot welds, but they're usually spot welded, some of them off the edges and to the inside, and they're pretty random patterns. And I'd rather just do 4 plug holes myself. So Since this is a 5/16 bolt, we got a 3/8 hole here. We just get this to where it's sitting pretty straight in the flange. Get it to where it's centered up in the hole and just put a bolt through there. Snug it up, and that's ready to be welded on. I got 3 of them here. I've still got a couple more up here to do and a couple more down here to do. But this is all that I was able to salvage at the moment out of the flange that was on the car. I think there's a couple more laying here somewhere. I must have kicked them out of the workbench or something by accident. And I have some more pieces that I salvaged off of other cars in the past. As soon as I figure out where I put those after moving, I'll salvage some more and finish this flange up. So now we're going to go and revisit this side window here. Now I've actually revisited it a couple times already, because throughout this process and trying to get the rear window shape, as I play with this to curve this down so that it looks good, I'll have a good line across here and not have corners, popping up here. I also need to factor in how I'm going to roll this into this and make sure that it's going to all work together. Now, I know a lot of people are expressing concern about this window and the shape of it and the fact that it's so square on the front. But I have thought about that, and there's been some things that's been in the works and I've been thinking about since the beginning. Now, the actual placement of the window during the mock-up was not the exact placement. That was just mock-up. And I realized at that time it needed to be shifted a little bit. Plus, we have this piece here that goes on the end of this, and that is how this thing hinges. As a pop-out window, it needs to have a hinge in the front, and I want to retain pop-out window because these things get hot enough inside here that you want that extra ventilation. Especially with the V6, it's probably going to be even worse. But one of the problems you got to deal with is square front. It's got to be square for the have the hinge. But you can work with this. Now, I have changed the angle of this window a little bit because in the mock-up, it was wider down here than it was up here. Now I have made that parallel, which brings that whole window down some, which actually does help me make all this work too, because this needed to curve down some. Now, I also had changed the fender line, if you remember, where this pulls forward further than it did with a much softer curve here, and then this angle is changed slightly as well, to try to help all this come together visually. Now when we do this post here, I can cut the bottom of this post to be parallel with this line, so it'll make that level out, not really level out, but start to go uphill like the doors are. And I've got 2 different ideas I'm thinking about working with this post. One, which this is actually the other side. I don't have this side post yet. I've located one that I can get, I just haven't got it yet. One idea is I can just radius the top of the post, give it as much radius as I can within this piece and this piece to soften that edge. Or the other thought was, since this curve doesn't quite match this one, this has more curve than this does, I also thought about cutting this further forward, somewhere an inch, inch and a half. I'm not sure yet, just an idea that I'm working on right now. And we can put a radius in here and then do a little bit of a scallop in there. And then that'll visually soften that a lot.